Hi all, my name is Shant Kazakjan and I'm doing my presentation on water shortages and climate change-induced drought. In this discussion or PowerPoint presentation, we're going to talk about what the environmental issue is, history of how it became an issue, who is affected, what can be done to help, how as public health professionals we address the issue, how to educate and protect those affected. This is all based on my paper, so let's get right into it. The environmental issue, uh, as you see on the picture on the right, that's just the US focusing on the drought monitor. The extremity is the more dark red it is, the more extreme it is. And you could see, states like Texas are already in the drought. And the crack lines you see are the delineates, which is dominant impacts. These things are all becoming more and more. It's increasing throughout the years. And it's not only in the US, but it's in worldwide. The water shortages due to climate change-induced drought is a pressing global issue, which has significant impacts on social, economic, and environmental aspects of our world. With changing weather patterns fueling a rise in temperature, drought events are exposed to becoming more frequent and severe. It's significantly reducing the availability and accessibility of freshwater resources. So the consequences of these water shortages are far-reaching and include reduced crop fields, food insecurity, health risk, and diminished economic growth. Due to this crisis, several strategies have been proposed, including rainwater harvesting, rational water usage practices, and the development of more efficient water management system, which we'll get more into throughout the slides. The urgent action that needs to be taken place for all this is to ensure that the water resources remain available and accessible, which is something we in the US currently are actually struggling with. So the history of the issue. The issue of water shortages and climate change induced drought has becoming increasingly pressing in the years. And the reason to that is the role of the greenhouse. This is the history, the role of the greenhouse gases. In the late 1800s, scientists began to recognize the role of greenhouse gases such as carbon dioxide. It was trapping heat in the Earth's atmosphere and contributing to global warming. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, also known as the IPCC, was in 1988. It established the United Nations to access the science of climate change and provide policymakers to address the issue. A fourth assessment report was in 2007. The IPCC mentioned before released its fourth assessment report, which stated that climate change would likely cause increased frequency and severity of drought in some regions of the world. Then we go to the water scarcity, which was in the early 2000s. Many parts of the world were already experiencing water scarcity with an estimated 1.2 billion people, which were lacking access to safe drinking water. Then we go on to the droughts and heat waves, which was in the mid 2010s. Several major droughts and heat waves occurred in different parts of the world, including California, Brazil, and India. Those events highlighted the impact of climate change on water availability and the needs for action. Then we go to the Paris Agreement, which was actually in 2015. The Paris Agreement was signed by, I believe, about 196 countries, which committed to global warming, limiting global warming to well below under 2 Celsius, and pursuing efforts to limit the temperature increase. The agreement basically recognized the importance of water in the context of climate change. And the recent events that we see nowadays, we see the weather, completely change from how it was when we were younger. There's severe droughts that are occurring in many parts of the world, including United States, South Africa, and Australia. These events are all, urgent and need action to be taking place. Next slide. We have who is affected. So I made a small circle because it's basically a whole rotation of everyone. The impact of water shortages and climate change-induced drought can be felt across many sectors and populations. The individuals and communities, as we see, one of the most direct impacts of water shortages and droughts is on the individual and community who rely on the water for their daily needs. Water scarcity can lead to reduced access to safe drinking water, which can cause dehydration, malnutrition, and other health issues. In addition, Those droughts can also reduce crop yields and lead to food insecurity, particularly for communities that rely on subsistence farming. When it says business and industry, that's for many businesses, which include agriculture, manufacturing and energy production. Water shortages and drought can lead to reduced productivity and economic losses for these sectors. Example, California drought conditions have led to reduced agricultural output, which has a ripple effect in the state's economy. The ecosystem and wildlife drought can also have significant impacts on those. The reduced water availability can lead to habitat loss, changes in species distribution, and increase the risk of wildfires. In addition, water scarcity can lead to increased competition for resources amongst species, which disrupt the ecosystem and basically lead to long-term damage. The vulnerable population it's just important to recognize that some populations are more vulnerable to the impact of the water shortages than others. Low-income communities, indigenous people, and other marginalized groups who may lack the resources to adapt to changing water conditions. Example, Canada has water shortages due to climate change and other factors, which lead to health and economic impacts. So how can we help? Here are some ways to address the water shortages and climate-induced drought. We need to improve water conservation practices, which is one of the most effective ways to address water scarcity. It's to improve water conservation. That includes things like fixing leaks, using low flow fixtures, and reducing water use in agriculture through more efficient irrigation practices. Is to develop sustainable water management plans. It's important to develop sustainable water management plans that take into account the impact of climate change. This includes the things like rainwater harvesting, recycling wash water, using water more efficiently, and in the industry. So promote renewable energy source, reducing dependence on fossil fuels can help address the water scarcity as energy production and a major consumer water. Invest in climate adaptation measures, which is things like adapting to the impacts of climate change. That can be like building more resilient infrastructure, developing drought-resistant crops, and improving water shortages. Water storage and distribution systems. Finally, address underlying social and economic factors. This can include things like poverty reduction, improving access to education and healthcare, and addressing issues of social inequality. So as healthcare professionals, what can we do? We need to develop and promote public health campaigns. Public health campaigns can help raise awareness about the impacts of water shortages and drought on public health and encourage individuals and community to take action. We could conduct research and surveillance, which could be basically to monitor the health impacts of water scarcity and drought to identify populations that are more at risk. This could overall help to inform public interventions and policies. Support the development of sustainable water management plans. By that, I mean, we can work on creating, public professionals can work on creating policymakers and stakeholders to support the development of these sustainable water managements to take into account of the climate change. Advocate for climate action. This is basically to help reduce the risk of water scarcity and drought in the long term. And finally, addressing the health disparities. This can include working to improve access to healthcare, addressing social and economic factors that contribute to health disparities, and ensuring that vulnerable populations are included in the public health intervention. Finally, how to educate and protect those affected. Provide education on water conservation and sustainability, provide information on health impacts, promote community resilience, provide access to clean water, and support vulnerable populations. So in conclusion, educating and protecting those affected by water shortages and climate change induced drought requires a multi-factored approach, both short and long term. By providing education on this and providing access to clean water, we can work to ensure healthier and more sustainable future for all. And that would conclude my presentation. I do apologize I had to do it this way. When I clicked play, it would not load into the actual Zoom. So thank you.